Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, our fellow Guyanese. Welcome again to one of our Globespan program. I am Nohar Singh, the host for tonight's program. We have quite a powerhouse tonight, power hitters that is. We'll be addressing the statements, Congressman's statement. We will also be talking about the resignations that's been in the airwaves, oil profits not adding up, and freedom of information. Quite a few topics, quite some big hitters here tonight. While I'm reading the message from Globespan, I'm asking all of our viewers, do share this program. Go ahead and use the links that you have, share the program among all Guyanese in all parts of the world. As Globespan continue in its 6 years, offering a community service, it's a platform that invites all political parties, civil religious leaders to share their opinions and address concerns. You can contact Globespan 24/7 by calling 631-782-8694 or email support@globespan247.com. Our topic this evening is State of Affairs, U.S. Congressman statement, parties' resignation, oil profits don't add up. And our guests tonight, as I mentioned earlier, are quite some big power hitters. We like to take this opportunity and welcome Mr. Christopher Ram. He's been with us many years ago. He's been very busy. Of course, I think you guys have been seeing him in the news. He's an attorney and chartered accountant. We have Dr. Terence Campbell, who is, taking a permanent seat here in Globespan, and every other week he's with us. And no other than Mr. Timothy Jonas, our senior counsel, who's been on this program for quite some years now. So first I want to go to Mr. Christopher Ram, but my preface to that would be that I've sort of referred to Timothy Jonas as a foot soldier for democracy. I've referred to Dr. Terence Campbell as being Henry Kissinger among the Guyanese, particularly the Afro-Guyanese population, trying to bring arrangements together. Mr. Ram, you've been in the news, you've been in the courts, you've been on the streets, you've walked the pavement, you've dealt with every aspect of the Guyanese lives. How do we describe Christopher Ram, and what are some of your key objectives as you continue this good fight that you've been putting forward for the Guyanese people?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, it has been some time. I consider myself just a citizen of Guyana, and my objective is to make this place a better place for every single Guyanese, regardless of political complexion, regardless of age, sex, region, anything like that. I think we have the absolute, not just the potential, we have the resources to be a great country for every single one of its citizens. I think we've fallen very short of that, partly because of governance issues, etc. But I guess we'll talk about that during the program.
Well, certainly we also want to be able to kind of label you from the outside. I mean, I'm looking at a foot soldier of transparency and information. You've been fighting that good fight for a while for us Guyanese. So if the Guyanese people, I mean, me personally, I would like to extend our gratitude to you for some of the good work that you're doing out there. Uh, Quickly, would you care to make any comments? There's a lot of movements in the political space. Actors moving from one parties to the other, some forming their own parties. How do you feel about what's taking place in the political landscape?
Well, it is such a dizzying pace, and people are moving in opposite direction. Apart from being head swinging, I sometimes wonder how come there's no collision, because they are moving in opposite direction. And sometimes you get a statement issue one hour and then another statement issue a couple hours later. I think it's always good that persons are willing to throw their hats in the ring. I, as a citizen, do wonder, well, where have these persons been? We've got so many issues that trouble us for the inter-election period. And you don't hear, you don't see these persons, but it's still a welcome development.
And would you agree that this probably is a very it's our democracy is changing? Do you feel that over the context of, let's say, two or three election cycle, this could be good for the growth of Guyana?
I think the main opposition has been so inactive and quiet for the better part of 5 years that they have lost their attraction to many people in Guyana. I think the PPP has had a fairly easy ride in its governance. It seems to do as it wants in Parliament. All the guardrails are being dismantled. You mentioned some of the things, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Procurement Commission, Commission of Information. Maybe the only thing we have left to count on would be the courts. So it doesn't, at my age, it doesn't inspire me with a lot of confidence, but maybe it's pure hope now. That's all that is left.
You know, on that note here, we've been trying to drive home with a message of hope practically on every program I've been on. So we'll continue on that route there, Mr. Ram. Thank you very much. Mr. Timothy Jonas, you on this program has mentioned so many times winner takes all has not been working for us. A one-seat majority gives pretty much more of a lack of a better description here, more of a dictatorial type of performance. So you always feel that some sort of a minority or coalition governments may be better for our future in Guyana, as in lieu of a constitutional reform. Last week on this program, Ravi Dev mentioned that politics has its own logic, and sometimes one needs to wait their time. They need to fall in line and keep within the political party they're with for gaining the outcome that they would prefer, the political party would perform. You have been a co-founder of ANUG with the great senior counsel, Mr. Ralph Ramkaran. And in that process of being co-founder of ANUG, you have lately, of course, resigned. Timothy, if you don't mind, just give us like a 1 minute in terms of touching on your constitution and how come the leadership was sort of rotating. That brings up a leadership that you may not be in total agreement with. That's one. And two, are you going against the logic, political logic, or you feel strongly in the decision you've made over the weekend?
That's an interesting and difficult question, or the thing about democracy is that technically it's supposed to be bigger than all of us. So if you really want to adhere to democratic principles, when you're creating an organization, you mentioned me and Ralph, there was one more, Henry Jeffries, three of us. When you're creating an organization, if you want to be serious about it, you have to go the whole hog. You really shouldn't try to cut corners to preserve control if you're going to let the democratic process work. And it's something that the states learned after FDR, who sat for 3 terms. They, immediately after FDR was in office for that long, imposed an amendment to limit any individual to 2 terms in office as president to ensure rotation and prevent too much dependence on a single person. So when we started up, what we did is we rotated the 2 positions, the chairmanship and the general secretary's position. And the rules of the organization were that you should not hold either of those positions for more than 2 consecutive terms. Whether it's a good rule or not, I think that it is important to maintain the institution as larger and more important than any individual. So you need to do something like that. For me, I'm sorry, what was the second aspect of your question, or?
The second aspect, your resignation, does that fall in line with that politics has its own logic?
Yeah, it's funny about this word politics. People use politics, that expression politics, to justify cutting corners ethically. And I don't think that that approach withstands scrutiny. Right is right, wrong is wrong. So you can't do something that is marginally wrong or obliquely dishonest and say that's okay, that's politics. And you hear people do that all the time, that's politics. You justify wrongdoing by saying that's politics. I think that you are either willing to cut ethical corners or you're not. And for me, that is more important than ducking, staying low, and hoping that people will overlook some dishonesty or some lie or some theft for what you may see as the larger objective. Often the objective does not justify what you do to reach that objective.
Thank you, Tim. So Dr. Terence Campbell, if I could just paraphrase what Tim is saying, there is many ethics, to a certain degree, morality takes precedence over sort of a political decision of what's right for politics. And that is also, for me, is a welcoming comment in the sense that if you're going to affect change, I mean, unless we are in agreement that everything that we have had in politics in Guyana has been all well and good, everything has been good for the country and the people. If we're not going to agree to that, certainly you want to be able to have actors that has an ethical, has a moral standard, and could be able to lead the country or work towards bringing the country towards a more amicable situation for all Guyanese. How do you fit into that? What's your thoughts on that politics has its own logic? And speak in the context also, if you don't mind addressing the context of some of the work that you're doing in the background, because you have been busy. You've been working hard in trying to bring groups together, political organizations together for the betterment of a stronger opposition. Dr. Campbell?
Thanks for having me on again, Noha. I consider it a privilege to join you guys every time on Globespan. Every time I'm here, I consider it a privilege. I also consider it a privilege to be on the program tonight with Tim and Chris. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but I think what unites us in our view about Guyana and what is wrong and the path forward is far greater than what separates us on any issue. And I think the frustration, my frustration with politics in Guyana, Tim mentioned that people will put aside ethical issues and moral issues and say, no, it's just politics. And I agree with him. But I think those of us who take a stand in opposition to that approach are really in a minority and really now on the periphery of political life in Guyana. Unfortunately, the idea that ethical guardrails and transparency and accountability and so on are not mainstream at all. Chris has spent and privately when we have conversations, I laugh at him and I say, you know, I'm not going to call his age, but I said to Chris, I said, Chris, there's no way that I'm still fighting for transparency, accountability, and good governance when I get to your age. I will throw in the towel. And so kudos to him for continuing the fight. On a personal level, I have, you know, of my work on the Natural Resource Fund and in fighting for accountability there. It so happens that Chris is one of the attorneys representing me in that case. I also support Chris's efforts to reinvigorate our democratic space with the challenge to have individuals run for political office. I believe in a vibrant opposition. I think it's extremely dangerous for us to have a degraded opposition. And so I've spent a lot of my time in the last 6 months, and especially, and more so the last 3 months, speaking with all opposition parties. I've even had a brief chat with Team Mohammed/Win, whatever you want to call them. And with the hope that we'd be able to get a grand coalition to either achieve a victory or to force the minority government that Tim would love to see in Guyana. Sadly, my efforts in the political domain have not been as successful as my efforts in the business domain, but I'm not giving up. I will continue to fight to see that we can get the change and a country that is more inclusive, reduce inequity, greater transparency, accountability, and so on.
Great. Thank you. Well, on that note there, I just want to extend our message here from Globespan again. And I'd like to say to all of our Guyanese brothers and sisters to help us achieve our goals, and that our goals include what Mr. Campbell just mentioned, and our vision for Globespan to help build a society that is much more informed from all sides, not just someone speaking to a chorus. You should be able to benefit from platforms that brings in discussions and ideas from all different aspects of our political and social and civil sides. A society where one can change from within so as to affect the changes on the outside, and a society that can reason together, a society that can work to keep hope alive, and that's something we really want to be able to accomplish at Globespan. Our vision is a country where its moral and ethical compass are directed by the word of God. So help us to build a Guyana where all Afro, Indo, Amerindians, and all races value each other as equal human beings. Imagine a Guyana where her wealth becomes your wealth, something that Mr. Christopher Ram has been fighting quite hard for. Mr. Ram, you'll be happy to hear Mr. Jailal posted, Mr. Ram is a national hero. We also had Mr. Never Silal posted, Mr. Jonas, you did well by your resignation. And then we have Miss Elizabeth Ramcharan, it's hard. I am leaning integrities out of the door. And I think she's talking in the context of our political landscape, which is something we're going to have to continue to inform our Guyanese brothers and sisters that needs to change. So I want to go on to our next our question. And this is a burning topic within the news media, and it's all over, particularly also in the diaspora. Many people can't believe that some of the, this aspect of it. So Devin, I want you to play the tape on the U.S. Congressman comments, the article from Kaito News, I think it is.
According to public filings with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Guyanese government signed a 6-month agreement with Continental Strategy LLC in December 2024. The contract is worth $50,000 per month, and outlines that the firm would provide lobbying and government relations services to Guyana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The aim, according to the filing, is to increase U.S. trade and investment in Guyana, assist in financial sector reforms, and raise Guyana's profile in the United States. The firm's duties include lobbying, preparing and disseminating informational materials, and engaging directly with U.S. policymakers. On June 23, John Barsa, a partner at Continental Strategy, emailed the Director of Communications for U.S. Congressman Carlos Gimenez, sharing the 5 draft tweets. In the email, Barsa clarified he was sending the material on behalf of the government of Guyana. These tweets were included in Continental Strategy's public filing with the U.S. Department of Justice. In a swift response, Mohammed said it has emerged beyond any reasonable doubt that the PPP-led government of Guyana has used taxpayers' funds to finance the U.S. lobbying firm to launch a campaign aimed at falsely portraying me as an agent of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Mohammed said he rejected Venezuela's claim that he was part of a protest movement of detailed review. My father is Essequibo born. I would never betray the soil my family is rooted in. I stand firmly for Guyana's sovereignty. I always have and always will, Mohammed said. Article taken from Kai Chor News.
Mr. Ram, there are many issues out of this, and one of the big issues that we are now would like to address is that this firm, this lobbying firm, is working for the government of Guyana, not any specific political parties per se. And the contents of those messages that were crafted by them and sent to these, based on Kaito News article sent to the congressmen and women, were basically alluding to Mohammed and his relationship with Maduro. Per se, if there are any proof, certainly everyone will want to see this proof. But if they're not, is this political interference, Mr. Ram? Is this trying to influence the outcome of an election in a foreign country?
To sharing that video and audio, the audio, the timing is extremely suspicious. It's unfortunate the PPP has done more to give Mohammed prominence than perhaps he himself has done. You find a very disturbing trend, and you recall for some of us who remember the 70s, Rabbi Washington and his own band of followers, and how they went around damaging property, injuring people, and in some cases, even more than that. One does not understand why the PPP appears to be as nervous as it is on the Mohammed issue. For the better or worse, Mohammed seems to be creating the buzz that was missing from the political environment and arena. And it does appear that his influence in some of the communities in which the PPP felt they had a neck hold, a stranglehold, may consider that Mohammed is a threat. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong in having a lobbying firm for the country. But the timing of this and the nature and content there suggests to me that is really a dirty trick exercise. It's an abuse of governmental power. It's certainly to use state funds clearly to promote the politic and to preserve the hegemony of the PPP must be truly worrying for all of us in Guyana. There's no rational basis for the government to be so determined just to hang on to power. If you think being in government is a responsibility to discharge to help your country, why do you think nobody else can do it? Or why do you think nobody else should do it? So, and you wonder whether this is all linked to securing oneself and corruption and protecting the legacy of whatever has been taking place for the past 4 years.
Yeah. And Timothy Jonas, two parts of my question. One, do you feel this is political interference? That's one. Two, the second part of it. And today's Mohammed, next election cycle, it could be someone else. Or this could be a continuous process for us here because there's so much um, disposable funds now that the government have, whichever government is in power of the day, can use in sort of stifling or influencing from the outside. So the two parts of the questions would be, the second part of my question would be that uh, what can be done about this legally within the framework of Guyana? Can Mohammed or anyone else there that's going to be affected, can they file any sort of legal proceeding for something like this?
Mr. Jonas, you're on mute.
I remember when Barack Obama was campaigning, when he was running for office, and a lobby group and his opponents started a rumor that he wasn't even American, that he was Muslim of Kenyan origin, and so that this senator from Hawaii, in the Bible Belt of America, there were people who were asserting definitively that this man isn't a loyal American. He's not even entitled to be running for office. That's how deep the poison and the rot of the democratic process can take you. Now, for a little thing like a Lamborghini, our inefficient and incompetent institutions had to go all the way to the states to try to find evidence for proof of how much a Lamborghini costs and how much this particular one cost and how it was paid for. Because after 50 years of absolute incompetence, our leadership has broken down our institutions, so we can't even deal with our own processes by ourselves. So we had to go to them for help. If there was any real evidence that our boy Mohammed had any connection that is as treasonable as is suggested there, if there was any real evidence, if the US is helping out with a little small Lamborghini, I have no doubt in my mind that they would be providing that much more serious information, especially since they themselves have sanctioned the Venezuelan officials. But you don't hear a whisper about that. All you hear is this advertising, this noise, this gossip from this lobby group. So without knowing the facts myself, I immediately discounted that as more noise, more rubbish. And I asked myself, what does a congressman know? Where do they get information from that the American government doesn't seem to have, so as to assist in what would be a centrally important prosecution of somebody who is accused of being hand in glove with Maduro directly, a renegade leader of a renegade state? I just saw that as more noise and more poison, politically motivated. I don't support Azruddin Mohammed, but that one I didn't give any credit to at all.
Tim, any legal options for someone like the Mohammed or anyone else that would be facing situations like these?
Well, I tend to deal with things practically. Anybody can sue, anybody can file a claim. But if you're filing a claim against a senator who's all the way, I think one of them is in Florida and one of them is somewhere in the West Coast, how do you find them to make them pay your judgment if you get a judgment? How do you enforce it? How do you go all the way there to get behind it? And how difficult will that
Forgive me,
entire
Tim.
process be? So yes,
Sorry, forgive me.
technically, I'm sure, yes, there's something you can do to claim libel or something, but what's the point? I think it wouldn't be worth the candle.
Oh, no, I wasn't talking in the context of filing a case against the congressman then. Why try to take on a fight you're probably not going to be able to win there? But to my point, what I was trying to ask you, there's a difference between a political party and the government of your country. And if you as a countryman, as a Guyanese, if your government is misrepresenting you, and if it is that, there is proof that was submitted to this firm that was hired, but with your taxpayers' money, what is your right as a taxpayer in a situation like this?
I'm sure you see already how obtuse your line of evidence is trying to trace it back to the government. you are making an allegation that we're not sure about a lobby firm, about payment by the government, about the source of this false or true information, whether it's false or true, whether it comes from the governmental or is conceived by the lobby firm or by some third intermediary. We simply don't know. So how do you prove any of these things?
And to Dr. Terence Campbell, if you probe and you push and you press, because this is something you don't want to happen to a Singh or to a Johnson or to any Guyanese, you want to be able to be in a position to say that, look, if they are actual proof, then we need to see the proof. If not, there shouldn't be outside interference as such. I mean, so to my point, what I'm trying to say is that how could we probe this for, how can a Guyanese citizen probe this further? Where would they have gotten that information? Because according to Kaitro News article, that firm literally crafted the messages to these congressmen. So they have to have information somewhere. And I'm sure within the United States, there must be some freedom of information where you could have better luck than Mr. Ram has been having in Guyana. Dr. Campbell?
Right. So I'm not going to be as I'm not a senior counsel. I'm not a counsel, so I'm not going to be as legalistic as Chris or Tim might be. And I would say this is a civil matter, so it's on the balance of probability and not beyond the shadow of a doubt. What we know is that the government of Guyana has engaged Continental Resources. There's never been any denial by the government of Guyana that they've engaged Continental Resources to do lobbying work on behalf of the government. And I want to point out that it's not just simply the government, but it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this work, and the objectives were set out there, raise Guyana's profile and so on. I have no issue whatsoever with the goals as established in that contract and what has been brought into the public domain and what has not been refuted. That's fine. But we also have, and I've seen quote unquote evidence, again, not refuted, and I understand that this had to be filed with US authorities, of a number of draft tweets made by Mr. Barsa, who was a partner of Continental Resources, and that were sent to members of Congress. And based on those tweets, based on that draft, that document with draft tweets, we then saw the congressman, issue a tweet. For me, this is not a court of law, but for me, I see a chain. And that chain, I consider, to answer your question, Nohar, I consider it to be definitely interference, political interference. Because, first of all, the content of the tweet and the draft tweets that were sent to the congressman have nothing to do with the clearly identified objectives of the contract, raising Guyana's profiles, promoting investment, and so on. That has absolutely nothing to do with the draft of the contract between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our diplomatic apparatus, which is supposed to be politically neutral, between that apparatus and the Continental Resources. That draft, unless there is a second contract at work, I am assuming, and if there is, the government should come out and say so. So unless there is a second contract at work, I take it that this is what is being done by Continental Resources as part of that the contract that has been made publicly available. Unless there's a second contract from the PPP or somebody, and if there is, they should say so. I'm taking it that we have state funds being used at a level of form good a good purpose, but a level of substance, something more nefarious, which amounts to political interference. And it does so in two ways. One, on the local level, it defames Azzuddin Mohammed because it makes him look as somebody who's engaging in treason, being closely associated with the Venezuelan government. And at the level of internationally, Azzuddin Mohammed, within the US, is sanctioned. And to have such additional allegations in the public domain draws more attention on him from US sources. A tweet like this coming from a congressman will naturally, raise an eyebrow in different Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, and so on. And I believe at that level, it's aimed to bring additional pressure on Azzuddin Mohammed to withdraw or to ease on his political activity. So it's two things. It's one, trying to raise the pressure on Azzuddin externally, and two, to undermine him domestically. And I think that this definitely amongst, in my mind, to political interference. And I would say that in certain well-established democracies, a government would fall on this alone, this evidence coming into the public domain. A government would fall, would be called upon to resign. But in Guyana, I'm going to go back to where Tim opened, it's just politics.
Yeah, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Colin Singh again from Canada, one of the faithful viewers at Globespan. But there's a comment here that I would like to address, and it's also relating to the ending part of your comment, Dr. Terrence. And I believe it came in from Amal Khan, I believe, says that this show is against all governments. And I really would like Mr. Amal Khan to know that our objective here is to bring up views from all sides. We are not against, we are for the people of Guyana, what is right for Guyana. And we're here to call out, because today it could be Mohammed, next year it could be you, and it may not be in the context of politics, it could be in the context of something else. So non-Guyanese should be put under this sort of microscope without actual proof, especially if it is that is your taxpayers' money at work. So we, for you to say that we are against all governments, if all governments are doing wrong, and based on what we have seen in this last 59 years, I think there's things that we need to address. And this is the only way that we're going to be able to move forward with a country that would be beneficial to all Guyanese. So on that note there, I really would like to go on.
Just 1 second. And,
Sure.
and for the benefit of that viewer, let me say absolutely that I am no supporter of the Mohammeds. So notwithstanding everything that I've said, I am trying the best I can, and we all have bias. And I think Tim said something that he's not a supporter of the Mohammeds, or some words, I don't remember his exact words, but I am not the support of the Mohammeds. So that whole diatribe was not in support of the Mohammeds, but trying to take an unbiased look at what I see in the public domain, what is wrong, and what should not be allowed to continue. This is not a position against the government. This is a position against political interference and use of state funds for such political interference.
Right. And just to add to that note there, that I think it's only fair for us to say that, yes, we will call out what is right and what is wrong with wrong, be it APNU, be it PPP, be it coalition government, or whatever the political parties may be. We as Guyanese have now sort of, we're evolving as a country and mainly as a people. We need to be more informed. We need to be able to question status quo, and it's the only way we will be able to elevate ourselves. On that note, there, I'd like to make some announcements. I want to thank Travelspan. They've been, in business for 31 years, being a company that has been within the community. We have Travelspan there. They have two fantastic programs coming up. One on July 31st to August 1st. It's an all-inclusive vacation to Cancun, Mexico. and it's called Caribbean Throwback. They have Super Blue, Chris Garcia. You get an opportunity to be among your folks, be among your fellow West Indians. At the same time, you're able to enjoy your entertainment. Another announcement from Globespan, they have the curry duck versus duck curry cooking competition, and that's going in its fifth year. That's August 7th to August 11th. Again, it's an all-inclusive occasion. You have a meet and greet. You have a competition day, curry duck versus duck curry. You have an all-white private party. You have a beach day with harmonia and dolak. And here again, you're getting an opportunity to enjoy your vacation, take your day tours, but at the same time, you're able to be among your own folks, your own culture, your own cuisine. Also, buyfromone.com is a company that ships West Indian food and groceries throughout the United States. People living in California, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, no matter where you live in the US, buyfromthenumber1.com. And also there's curryrotibox.com on Liberty Avenue. They're also offering good West Indian food, fresh food delivering into Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, Bronx, and Long Island. Moving on with our program, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. And we want to go to our next topic here tonight, and that is the topic of the oil dollars are not adding up. Devin, do you have that tape?
Most Guyanese hear that ExxonMobil raked in over $10 billion in profit last year and assume that means Guyana got its fair share. But chartered accountant Christopher Ram, in his most recent newspaper column, has exposed what he deemed as the oil giant's classic profit manipulation scheme by turning billions of previously undisclosed and unaccounted costs into paper profits. And he renewed calls for the government to establishment of an independent petroleum commission. The government has dodged the setting up of such a commission, although it had promised to put this in place when it was campaigning for office in 2020. In fact, as recent as last year, August, Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat, among other things, said that the establishment of a petroleum commission here now will slow down the oil and gas sector. Bharat had said that while it sounds nice to say put the Petroleum Commission in place, the advantages and disadvantages must be considered. Article taken from Kai Chor News.
Mr. Ram, that's one of your other initiatives out there in your quest for transparency, for information, and for the betterment of Guyanese. Tell us, Mr. Ram, what would be your comments on this? Is this fancy footwork here?
Mr. Ram, you're on mute.
It's a matter of how the 225 lifts of oil in 2024 have been allocated and accounted for. Essentially, we are told that the government of Guyana gets 4 for royalty and 28 for profit oil, and therefore the oil companies, because the government and the 3 oil companies get an equal share. The question then is, how did that 165 lifts get into the sole revenue of the oil companies? And that's because, from an explanation given to the media today by a representative of Exxon, is that, look, we have had these accumulated costs that we have not been able to recover because of this 75% limitation, and that figure, that massive difference is because of this unrecovered cost that no one has ever quantified or publicized. No one is accusing the company of stealing. We say, I, as a fairly seasoned accountant, I'm simply saying that is very, very misleading accounting, and it defies international financial reporting standards, which are the guiding principle for accounts presentation in Guyana. So it's a matter of how the accounting is done. Nobody knows, like, for example, at the end of 2024, they having taken 165 lifts, the equivalent of 165 million barrels of oil for cost. We don't know how much are going to be carried forward into 2025. And that's the kind of problems we have. We've all, and that has accompanied this whole business of the oil sector simply because there is no accountability. I find it incredible that Minister Barrett is now saying, 5 years after they have committed to having a petroleum commission, that we need to study the advantages and disadvantages. Look, even sand is regulated in Guyana. You got to go to the GGMC and get permission. Forestry, rice. But yet the most important economic segment, bigger than sugar has ever been, we are saying, no, you don't want professional, you don't want independent supervision. Leave it to two politicians who have breached just about every commitment and every promise that they've made in relation to the petroleum sector.
Hey, Tim, this is a time in our history where it's an opportunity, and some may refer to it as a window of opportunity. To me, this is a wide door of opportunity for the Guyanese and the trajectory of our country. And the Guyanese lives, when you look at some of the people's lives on social media, or even when you go through the country, the state of affairs for them. Tim, in this big door of opportunity that we are seeing, this ingest of oil revenue coming in, and folks like Mr. Ram, who is trained chartered accountant, CPA, as we would know them, cannot get visibility into the numbers so that they could be able to quantify. And Dr. Terence Campbell will probably attest to this. We have something called deferred expenses, etc., that we move from one year to the other. We don't know really what's happening here. But to my point and my question to you, Tim, what does these Guyanese people do in situations like this? I mean, how is it? You've always talked about, on this program, you've always talked about the lack of transparency, the lack of information, the lack of seeing how contracts are distributing. And in this specific area in the oil and gas, and with this windfall that Guyana is having for the first time in history, what would you say to the people? How could you encourage them to be more involved so that they could be able to sort of they could be able to know what they're earning, what's theirs? Timothy Jonas?
You're asking a lot of difficult questions tonight, Noah. But I think you will agree that everybody wants an easy fix. Nobody wants to understand the hard work, the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts that goes behind the implementation of any real system. So yes, in accounting, there are all kinds of ways to hide your profit, put off your profit, avoid declaring your profit. There are all kinds of tricks. And we talked about ring fencing, we talked about hiding expenses, that kind of thing, sharing expenses with other branches of your organization and all of that. So it is not acceptable to have an organization running with complete autonomy as if they're God, and no one having access to scrutinize their accounts to see how they're doing what they're doing. Great. So I completely agree with Chris. Now, there are two problems with moving forward. The first problem is that the amount of money is so enormous that the government doesn't need to be efficient. They have more money than they can spend. We are seeing expenditure going on all over the place. We're seeing pockets being filled everywhere. It is not a problem if a contract isn't done well. We'll get somebody else to do the contract. If it's not done well, again, we get a third person to do the contract, because government economics is about keeping your people happy, your supporters happy, by awarding contracts. So if you have a road that's going to last for 15 years, you have a problem because you don't have another contract to give for 15 years. And if you multiply that by 500 roads, you need to have things that need to be refixed rapidly and quickly. So if you look at our East Coast Road, you will see that the median, which was tiled very recently with red and white tiles, already the tiles are raising up and need to be repainted and cleaned because they were poor quality, they were installed badly, but it's an ongoing contract. So somebody else will get a couple $1 million in 6 months to repaint them and clean them again. And that is how you keep your loyalists happy, by the continuous awarding of contracts. And there is so much oil money that the government can afford to do that. And we're going into elections. So we can buy those gifts that we promise these supporters, and we can award those contracts that we promise those other supporters. And we can appoint to commissions and boards those other supporters and pay them large amounts of money because there's that much money there. But to admit that there has been no fiscal responsibility and no proper investigation and no assessment of accounts and nothing done to block the breach that we all fear exists in the revenue that should be coming from Exxon versus the revenue that is coming. That is to admit wrongdoing. And that is to open a fight which might not be politically expedient right now, given that you've sat quietly for 4 years. So this isn't about the good of the country. It's not about being fiscally prudent, fiscally responsible. It's not about good management. It is about marketing, looking good, giving contracts and promises to your loyalists, to your supporters, and avoiding any cloud of suspicion going into elections. That's all it's about.
And I think one of the viewers typed, when you're starting a new political party, that's from the grasshopper, Mr. Jonas. Just, I like to tell all of my brothers and sisters, all of my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters, and everyone that's concerned, even if you're not Guyanese, that we're trying hard to keep a mature, civil, and diverse conversation on Globespan. We don't have all the bells and whistles, meaning there's no shouting, and we don't have colorful languages, just reasonable discussions to disagree and to agree together. We avoid programs where some people want to speak to a chorus only to their supporters. We're trying to do something very different. I think it was Dr. Miles Monroe that said, criticism is another set of information that help us rise higher and grow. So help us to share the message of hope by subscribing to Globespan. You could also be notified when Globespan goes live. Also, do share the links and recommend the guests so that we could continue this diverse conversation in Globespan. Dr. Terence Campbell, it's hard for someone to sort of digest that there's so much money, they could do whatever they want, whichever government in power, be in APNU. We've seen situations with APNU when they had the oil bonus. And now currently here in this situation, referring to Mr. Ram's action in the courts regarding more information also on the oil funds. Given the state of affairs for people in Guyana, I mean, what would be your comments? How do you feel? Because there's a burning in our hearts to say that if there's so much money, then our people should not be living on $150,000 a month. And I mean, if you're looking at and you mentioned this in one of your last appearance in Globespan, you spend $10,000 a week on fruits alone. So how does that correlate together? How could we relate to all of this as simpleton people, as people that having a simple lives? Dr. Campbell?
So two things. I wanna support what Tim said about inefficiency in the spend of oil. It's been spent more contracts for friends and family rather than efficiently. And I think I mentioned it in the last program. Because for anyone who lives in Guyana, traverses the East Bank Road, and within the last 5 years, if you've driven between that, especially section between Diamond and Craig, that piece of Grove on the East Bank, that road was done. It was a nightmare. It was the only time I ever missed a flight, and now it's been completely redone again. But Nohar, permit me to go back and maybe just change the program a little bit if I could be so take up some of your jurisdiction here, because I think that the numbers, the Exxon numbers that came into the public domain, even for someone trained in business like myself, they're a bit confusing, and the same thing for Chris. And but I'd like to ask Chris a question, because and maybe I'm doing this also so that the public at large could kind of understand what the issue is when Exxon declares 10 billion. We have a contract that, if I remember it clearly, says 75% of oil revenue will be used for cost recovery. That's the cost that's used to cover drilling, to establish the FPSO, and so on. And that is what typically we would call in business capital expenditure. Now, outside of that 75% of the revenue, there is a split. The government of Guyana, there's what's called profit oil, which is shared, as far as I know, 50-50 between Guyana and the partners of Exxon. So Guyana gets 12.5%, and Exxon and its partners get 12.5%. The Guyana also gets a 2% royalty. The total oil revenue for Guyana, so let's just say it's a roughly 50-50 split. Forget the fact that Guyana gets 14.5 because of the extra 2%. Guyana got $2.6 billion gross, roughly, in 2024. So it's unfathomable for me, and perhaps for Chris, to understand how Exxon is able to declare a profit that's fourth in the same year when it's supposed to be Exxon's take of, so Guyana gets 2.6 billion, Exxon and its partners, and I think Exxon has 45% or whatever the number is. Exxon's profit without, even their gross without expenses, ought to be less, just about under half of 2.6 billion. It's supposed to be like 1-point-something billion for the year. But we have Exxon declaring $10 billion, a figure almost 6 to 7 times what they ought to be declaring. And that's gross, but that's without taking out any expenses. So one has to ask oneself, where is this massive profit coming from? Now, Chris has said, and I've read Chris's articles, where he has said that they say it's cost recovery. Basically, cost recovery, this is what you put out as CapEx and what you're getting back. From an accounting point of view, and I'm not a chartered, I don't see how that comes into profit. And so, just without a deep dive into the numbers here, Noah, I am left to wonder if it is that they were not true with the numbers on cost recovery, right? On costs in the first place, and now there's a huge surplus that is coming back to them over and above what they actually spent, and they're forced now to declare it as a profit. And so, just I don't want us to gloss over this 10 billion, and I'd like to hear Chris's take on this as an account, because these are things that are going through my mind just as a simple businessman. It's how do you get to 10 billion when your take in a single year should have just been 1.3 billion or somewhere around there.
Or even to that extent, I mean, the 2-point-something billion that Guyana is getting, if it is a 50-50. So hence my point when I started the program, the oil numbers are not matching up. It's like some really fancy footworking here done in the accounting system. So, Mr. Ram, I'll give way to you. You're the chartered accountant, you're the professional. This is the Guyanese people money. This is an opportunity for Guyanese to change their lives. And not only in getting roads that we have to build over and over, but real meaningful change. So, Mr. Ram, go ahead.
Thank you. And I just want to make a comment on what Tim said. It is indeed true that we've got so much money that we can't cope, we can't spend it responsibly. But let us remember this is a non-renewable resource. This is supposed to be an intergenerational asset. So we should put aside a good hefty chunk. That oil is not going to come back, maybe not for the next 2 million years. So we ought, and this is why countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Norway, they have this sovereign wealth fund that put aside the substantial part of the earnings for the benefit of future generation, and also for stabilization of economy, etc. Now, we're right, everybody. It's a difficult concept to understand simply because this company has taken the lead from the government that, look, we can do whatever we want with information. This government does not respect information. They are behaving in their own way, just like how the government of Guyana treats its citizens. We don't have to give them information. Any accountant would tell you, look, financial statements should be to inform, not to arouse suspicion. What they have raises more questions than answers, and for the simple reason that it's bad accounting. They get away with it. Nobody cares about it. We from one problem to another, and we just want. That's in my understanding, and I've been an accountant since I think it's 1973 or something like that. And you cannot, you recover a cost and you're going to say that that is income? No, you're simply replacing one asset with another. But it's because they may not have been showing, they may be manipulating this very, this unrecovered cost. And it's not 75, it's only 75% if you haven't reached, it could be much less. So that if your cost is 40%, that's what it is. But they have been allowed by the government and by the ministry, who could not deal with 114 million, but can deal with 25 billion. That's the kind of thing. So it's manipulating the numbers, not for stealing, maybe, and I think that's why Exxon came out with a response today, because they're concerned Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, and all of those places are carrying on about these profits, which are not really profits earned during this year. And I think they're not because the guy is making noise, but because of the message that is being sent to the stock exchange and to Wall Street, that look, these numbers are suspect.
Yeah. Yeah, and on that note, yes or no, on the issue of Exxon being a public traded company, their financial have to be up to finite scrutiny. So there's no way of them having these sort of manipulating of numbers. It has to show up at some point. Am I correct to say that, Mr. Ram? You the chartered accountant.
I think you're absolutely correct.
Okay. Now that you mentioned in your response just now the lack of information, so that leads us to another point there, another one of your initiative. Devon, please, the one on the freedom of information.
Chartered accountant and attorney Christopher Ram has approached the High Court for the second time over what he said is the sustained and deliberate refusal by Commissioner of Information Justice, retired, Charles Ramson Sr. to provide information under the Access to Information Act, 2011. According to Ram, the new application seeks a declaration that the Commissioner is a public authority within the meaning of the Act, a ruling that his failure to respond constitutes a deemed refusal under Section 18.3, a finding that he has breached Section 23 by failing to provide the required notice or reasons, a mandatory order compelling the release of the requested information within 14 days, and costs, together with such further relief as the court may consider just. Ram, who consistently led public protests against the commissioner's office back in April, said he made further requests to the commissioner for information on tax payments made by the government on behalf of ExxonMobil under the 2016 Petroleum Agreement, the related certificates of assessment, whether these payments were reflected in the national accounts or disclosed in EITI reports, the commissioner's statutory reports to the National Assembly, and statistical data on how his office processed information requests. Between 2015 and 2023. Article taken from Kai Chor News.
Mr. Ram, you're getting a lot of props on this program here tonight. You're dominating this program.
Well,
But I really would like, Mr. Ram, I really would like our Guyanese viewers to know that this information initiative that you're doing, the questioning of the Exxon dollars, and so many of the other initiatives, not only you, but other good, strong Guyanese are taking. It's not for today alone. It is for our history, our future going forward, and taking into consideration what our history has been. We as Guyanese talk about and how bad things are. We must be active players. We must be able, and we're not looking to condemn anyone. If you notice, we try to stay away from that. What we're trying to do is to get information and to lead towards, different discourse on what the specific situation would be like. So, Mr. Ram, this is one of your other initiative in trying to get information. Please just give us a couple of minutes on this, and then we'll move to Timothy Jonas.
Well, thank you again. As you know, we had a series of picketing exercises outside of the office of the Commissioner of Information, which happens to be a property owned by the Commissioner. We were hoping, we've written the President, we've said, look, can you please meet with us, a group of citizens concerned about the non-operation of this act. He has not, for over 4 weeks, the President has not even acknowledged our letter. We are, in fact, going out there on Friday at 12 noon, and we will be going outside of the office of the President on this occasion. Look, information, in my view, in whatever area of life, we talked about accounting, we talk about management, we talk about democracy. Information is the lifeblood, is the oxygen of any society, of a democratic society. And Mr. Noor, I have to explain. Look, we've got wonderful support. Persons have come up and said, look, can we help with a little bit of financing? We know you give some refreshment, because we say, look, if people come out at midday, have a little a drink and a snack. Unfortunately, the President himself has been very adamant. How could a president, it defies understanding, a president who has retained constitutional and portfolio authority for information said, I don't interfere. He must know that the office holder is not doing his job. He has never done his job. From all appearances, he's unfit to do his job. We hear, I've been quietly told that, look, oh, don't worry. After September 1, he's not going to be there. I don't know who's going to move him, but that's not the point. He ought to be doing his job, and society should be outraged. This is not a partisan issue. This is a constitutional issue. This is a right not only in our constitution, all international treaties of any complexion. And here it is. Citizens have to go out there, probably risking the rain, just to say, Mr. President, please take note. You are responsible, and we're holding you responsible, and we expect you to do your work.
And Tim, you've always mentioned on this program the lack of transparency and visibility, and how contracts are avoided, etc. But what Mr. Ram is actually trying to do here also, it's sort of not a parallel, because they all meet together in the context of government, good governance, etc. Tim, what could the people of Guyana, or what could they people do, God-fearing citizen of Guyana, of what could they do to help Mr. Christopher Ram in these initiatives? So, and what advice would you have as well?
I don't know, Har, this is the third time for the evening you've turned to me to ask me what can the people do. And there's this dream, this fallacy in a democratic society that power belongs to the people. Power does belong to the people because the people get to vote. But in the day-to-day administration of governance, and in the allocation of power to the various government departments, there's very little that the people can do. And with increasingly complex societies, nobody has all the expertise in all the areas. And in fact, democracy itself is the election, not of the person who's most competent for the job, but the election of the person who markets himself the best. So when you ask me what can the people do, democracy is not a spectator sport. I borrowed that expression from a good friend of mine with his permission. Everyone should be participating, but how do you participate? Social media has given us a platform that a lot of keyboard warriors with very little expertise pronounce solemnly. I made an exception on this occasion, and I read some of the comments being said on this show. And I see that there is someone who quarreled about Terence's and my comment on the roads. And their comment was, people are building and rebuilding roads all the time. And I want to say to that person, that's not the truth. If you just make a simple Google check, an asphalt road is supposed to last before 15 to 25 years before you have to look at it and undertake serious repairs again. Nitu Makond is the name that is given, saying that all countries build roads over and over. So because there's this platform, people feel able to spout anything off the top of their heads, whether it's true, whether it's not, whether it's researched, whether it's not. And the fact is, there is very little individual power to people. So when you say, what can the people do to help Chris? Do everything you can to help Chris. There are 3 people on your show now doing everything they can just by talking and being on this show, just by doing the background work to present as hopefully as thoroughly and with as little bias and as much research as possible the information. But how powerful is the individual? Not very powerful, I'm afraid, no.
You know, Tim, you may not have, I have to tell you, I mean, the few things you said, they are very meaningful to our viewers, because I think they now realize, and we do have, you know, fantastic set of followers, people on the YouTube, and many of them are very silent. They're not as, could be, you know, some of the condemning comments we see, and we see some lots of positive comments. So essentially the takeaway from your comment there, that don't be a spectator in this, participate, be a part of it, but don't be a part of it in terms of just a personal standpoint. Take it in the context of the country. And on that note of comments, Mr. Jerry Jailal wrote, people like Mr. Ram and Mr. Golsaran are national treasures, helping us to understand this business. They're expert and we have to listen to them. This is above all Guyana and not one political party. And that's well said, Mr. Jailal. It's above one political party. Um, Dr. Terence Campbell, it was on your recommendation that we invite Mr. Christopher Ram here tonight because of all these initiatives. And I really want to be able to tell the viewers, the Guyanese people, a little more than not being a spectator, only being a spectator on the sideline. What else do you want to tell our Guyanese people, that where we are at this juncture in our history, this again is a huge opportunity to change the lives of Guyanese? How could we have this type of initiative, and how could we have more of these type of initiatives?
So I want to, I often say it, and I will say it as long as I'm on Globespan, that each one of us has a bias. But we should all find there's a common ground where we should all be able to meet at some point. And, you know, in business, we have a statement that, and I want to tie this back to what was the subject of this round of discussion, which is about information, the commission of information, freedom of information, and so on. In business, we say garbage in, garbage out. But that can apply to everything in life. The better the information that one has, the better the decision making that or the result. What we have had in Guyana, this has not been limited to the PPP government, is a natural tendency to hide things. And I think what Chris has done and what Tim and I, to a more limited extent, have been doing is trying to fight against this. We would have, you know, fighting to have information brought into the public domain so that people and governments can make better decisions. Because once the information, once a government, any government, knows that certain information is hidden, then they make decisions that are not necessarily optimal. Too often in Guyana, we have had to depend on unorthodox sources to provide us with information of government corruption and so on. And I'm not limited it to any administration here. We absolutely need to have the Commission of Insurance that is responsive to the citizens, inquiries from the citizens. In the United States, there's a Freedom of Information Act whereby citizens can write and demand information that's released. News organizations write, ask for information, it's released. We need to have this in Guyana so that the information, not to depend on unorthodox sources for information that will then be questioned. An official, so where we can go to an official source and ask for that information, and it be the fact it is a sin. It is that we've had a Commission of Insurance in place, and I cannot recall
information.
I cannot recall a single instance where it may be, forgive me if I'm wrong, but in following matters in the public domain, I do not recall a single instance where this gentleman has provided information on a request. I can recall where he rejected requests for information simply because he was not addressed properly. You know, Charles Ramson, SCJ, retired. It all has to line up. But it's not only. I think as a nation, we must find ourselves on that common ground. We must put aside our partisan cloaks and find ourselves at that common ground where we're able to not only request information so that there's better decision making, but to be able to challenge the government of the day about work that's being done, about decisions that are being made. And so it's always in the best interest of the people of Guyana. And I want to touch back to where Chris went. I sit on the Natural Resource Fund. I've spoken about this on several occasions, that we are currently spending every single cent that is coming in of oil money. And Chris did point out that we can't spend it, and I did on the last program, said we don't have the absorptive capacity at this point to spend 2.6 billion. We don't have the qualified contractors and so on. And so we give it out to people who are unqualified, and the spend is then wasted. It would be better to put some of that towards future generations, towards savings for some volatility in commodity prices, oil prices, and so on. But we as a nation, as a people, we've got to start seeing everything through partisan lenses and be able to find ourselves on that common ground where we can make decisions that are best for Guyana.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I'll take some of your good words and make it part of Globespan motto. Thank you there, Dr. Terence Campbell, and I'm glad you draw the parallel too, or the comparison with Freedom of Information Act for the United States. So it is really a time in our history, and it is a robust time as well in the political arena. We have quite a bit of political parties contesting elections. But one of the other initiative that I believe Mr. Ram presented before the courts, and I think Dr. Vishnu Bisram wrote a letter to that effect regarding independents contesting the election. Devon, can you please?
It has been brought to my attention that a court hearing in front of Chief Justice Roxanne Myers was heard last Wednesday on a matter pertaining to whether an independent can run for office. The challenge is long overdue, as Guyana's laws deny one's right to be truly independent of others. Denying anyone the right to run for elective office is a gross violation of democratic rights. The court is probably asked to determine its constitutionality and to permit an independent to run for any office in the country. A candidate must not be forced to have political affiliation. In virtually every country, certainly in every traditional democracy like the ABCE countries and all Commonwealth and CARICOM countries, an independent can seek elective office. Guyana is a sole exception. According to Guyana's ROPA, a candidate cannot run as an independent. He or she must run as a member of a party for any national office. That part of the act undermines democracy. For the local election, ROPA allows independents to run. Why the law allows independent candidates to run for local and not national office is not clear. That in itself is unconstitutional. Article written by Dr. Vishnu Bisram.
And viewers, tonight our topic is state of affairs, and we kind of touched on many different items. And what we're trying to do is to stay abreast with what's in the news out there, certainly bringing you information. We talked about the congressman statements. We talked about the oil profits are not adding up. We talked about the Freedom of Information Act. We talked about the some of the other initiatives by Charter Accountant and Attorney Mr. Christopher Ram. Here's one of them too regarding independence. Mr. Ram, when you're giving your comments on this, could you also include your closing comments, because we're coming up to program time, and I really comment on this independence being able. And before I actually release it for your comment, I believe that we are in this period of time where, from all of this different actors, different political parties, and over the cycle of 2 or 3 or 4 election cycle, that's in the context of 15, 20 years, which is a blink of an eye in a nation's lifetime. Maybe from all of this, we could get some sort of leaders that would see beyond the partisanship, would see beyond the political parties, and would be able to see the horizon of our country, or the vastness of our potential as people. As Guyanese, we have done fantastically well in the United States, in Europe, all over the world, and even in Guyana. We still have that potential, but we need to be able to give everyone the opportunity. So as independents, Mr. Ram, what's your feelings about this? I think this was one of your initiative as well.
Mr. Ram, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, there are actually 2 actions before the court. One brought by Mr. Kamal Rangparang. It means the client, and there's a case by Rosedale Ford for Dr. Vishnu Bandhu from the United Republican Party. It is my view that and if you were to look at the Hansard and all the constitutional debate in the post-Gordonson issues, it was intended, it certainly was intended, whether the Constitution or the ROPA is as clear as it ought to be, is a matter for the court to decide. I would like to stop now to say thank you very much for having me on. I felt like if I was answering charges with all those clips you showed. And I'd like to hear Mr. Timothy Jonas on this issue.
Mr. Jonas, just before you make your closing comments as well, just for clarity purpose, yes, I asked you 3 times about what the people can do, because I truly believe the solution is in the people. Information is what they need. So go ahead, Mr. Jonas, give us your closing comments.
Thank you very much, Noah. I'm very happy that you had Chris here, because Chris has been fighting a sincere fight for a long time. And you talk about educating the people. I think he should be front and center in that process. One of the disadvantages of a democracy where there's so-called equality is that everyone gets one vote, regardless of competence, regardless of knowledge, regardless of prejudice. It's not a survival of the fittest. It is equality regardless of everything. No, it's the best system we have. I'm not knocking it. But it does not translate into necessarily the best leadership. In fact, as long ago as the ancient Greeks, the concept of democracy was criticized for the very reason that an uneducated population will result in poor choices at election time. We have had ethnic-based politics in Guyana since independence, relying on first of all, the agrarian economy and limited education of the majority, the poverty of the majority, the physical separation of where people live in the villages and the rural areas to ensure that voter bases remain ethnically allied. And if you look at your comments and you look at the ethnicity of the people making the comments, you can assume almost without exception that the comments favor the party of that ethnicity. This isn't a criticism of the people. The fact is that the 2 large parties are ethnic-based. And being ethnic-based, when they are in power, each favors folk who look like them. So you would be a fool to vote for the party that didn't look like you, knowing that that party is likely to be ostracizing you. That's where we are. That's not about education. But when you mingle it with the fact that education levels in Guyana are so low, that poverty levels are so high, you do have a status quo that is hard to upturn. So we need to look at those folk who are in the middle, who are willing to jump both ways across the political divide, who are not mired in that tribal loyalty, and understand that in Guyana at long last, there are enough of them to make a difference. And I think when you ask, what can the people do? Those are the people who we need to focus on. And the reason the government is so afraid of Mohammed is that Mohammed is undermining the folk who ordinarily would vote for the government, but can be enticed away. And the majority that the government thought 2 years ago they would definitely be getting by spending all of this money on contracts, they're not so sure of that majority now.
Yeah.
So there is power in that middle ground, people who are thinking and are willing to vote on policies rather than on tribal ethnic loyalty. And we have to see if that can grow and be nurtured and turn into something powerful.
And you're young enough to be there for the next 4 or 5 election cycle, Mr. Jonas. But the takeaway from what Timothy Jonas has said, we have to stop voting race. We have to vote issues. And I believe, if I could paraphrase him as well, there's nothing wrong with us being able to give critical support. There's nothing wrong if you are an APNU supporter or PPP supporter or WPA supporter or ANUP supporter, for you to question from within, because that's where the strength lies. And another takeaway from Timothy Jonas' comments there is that the power does lie with the people. So Dr. Terence Campbell, over the course of you being on this program, I've always mentioned that we need to count the cost. And again, we are at a timeline in our history where we need to count our cost in making the decisions and acting in this partisan way, what is costing us. I'd like to leave this program off with hope rather than, last week program, the boys them left off where all these new political actors are not going to go nowhere. They're pretty much looking for positions, etc., etc. But I like to give the people hope, Dr. Campbell. What hopes can you give these people in the context of this discussion tonight, and anything else you would like to add as a closing statement?
Let me start first by saying the letter quoted from Dr. Vishnu Misra. I'm surprised that my two friends, learned friends, didn't highlight it. Said that the Chief Justice, Roxanne Myers, and I did take a glance at the program online. I saw the Honorable Clement Rohi was watching, and I could imagine he must have cringed to see Roxanne Myers as the Chief Justice. So I just wanted to point out that mistake. I think that the Chris's action, which I supported and happened to have known about its development, and it was something that Tim and I discussed maybe as far back as 2018, will, if it's successful, reinvigorate our democracy. And let me just cite one example. If our constitutional arrangements were different and individuals could run even for the highest office of the land, imagine the fear of the PPP apparatus with an Azruddin Mohammed running for the presidency at this point in time. The whole system would be shaking at its foundation right now, because he would be a serious threat in such a constitutional order. But unfortunately, that's not what we have. But I take hope. We also see we saw yesterday Mr. Manzo Walton Desir coming together with the People's Movement and VPAC. We saw Anno going with Win. And I think all of this is being forced because of the list system and the need to run in minimum constituencies and the prohibition on the individuals. But you asked for hope, and there is hope. There's hope because we're seeing new players emerging on the political scene to challenge the established parties. Mohammed, VPAC, People's Movement, Amanza Walton Zir, Simona Brooms, Assembly for Liberty. There is hope. There are people who are willing, notwithstanding the risk, to enter into the political domain and to challenge the orthodoxy that exists. And on the outside, there is hope because there are people like myself and Tim and Chris who will fearlessly speak our truth and put our money into court matters and taking issues to court as individuals to challenge on transparency, on fiscal responsibility, and on reinvigorating our democracy. So I look at all those movements. A lot of the programs, your last two programs, the change in political landscape and the changes that we're seeing, that all gives me hope that there will be no monopoly on power. There'll be no monopoly on government. That people are taking the steps to reinvigorate our democracy, and Guyana ultimately will get the kind of governance that it deserves.
Well, Dr. Terence Campbell, you certainly have my vote there because you're speaking words that are very encouraging, particularly to the youths, to the new young generation, which is the biggest voting bloc in Guyana. You're giving them hopes because too often we keep hearing, you must fall in line, you must be within the political realm, even if your conviction and your commitment to Guyana is greater than what you're seeing within the political party lines. We coming to the end of the program, and I just want to read another comment. And if you take this comment in the context of what Timothy and Jonas said, and even Mr. Ram and yourself, is that Guyana is getting a windfall of money. And I think you, Dr. Campbell, had mentioned that It's literally overheating with the amount of funds that's going into Guyana. But listen to this comment from Mr. Edgar Prasad and see the irony in this comment. Mr. Singh, why talk about sovereign wealth fund and the capital cities still do not have any sewage system or proper drainage? You see the irony in that. All this money talking about wealth fund, protection and contingency for the future, but at the same time, you don't have a proper sewage system. Gentlemen, I really enjoyed this. My son said to me tonight that this cast seems to be a real powerhouse, and you certainly were. You have informed the Guyanese, you have given them different viewpoints, and I really want to thank all of you. And on behalf of all the viewers at Globespan, I want to thank Devin for his commitment to this program. Devin is a non-Guyanese, but he has always been so in depth in the Guyanese plight and wants to see a country that's better for all. So I want to thank Devin. Thank you, Mr. Ram. I hope we could have you again more often. You've been off this program too long. Timothy Jonas, is always a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, I finally got it. It's about the people, Mr. Jonas. It's about the people. And Dr. Campbell, thank you so much.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you very
Have a
much,
good
Noah.
night.
Pleasure to